Again, welcome everyone to the webinar. So today we're going to be talking about a few different topics that are often related to each other: artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation. We're going to talk about all three of these areas. We're going to examine how specifically these concepts are transforming the way hotels are operating, and we're going to have a special focus on forecasting and pricing in particular. Before we dive in, I do want to take a crack at putting some definitions around these terms, because I think these are terms that you hear a lot about, but they are often kind of either misused or used in different ways that may be confusing. So I just want to we'll start with artificial intelligence. So I did a little internet research, and according to Bethany Edmonds, who's the Associate Dean at Northeastern's Computer Science Master's Program, she says, on a basic level, artificial intelligence is where a machine seems human-like and can imitate human behavior. So like Alexa and Siri are maybe good examples of artificial intelligence in action. These behaviors include problem solving, learning, planning, and these are done through analyzing data, identifying patterns, and in order to replicate those behaviors. So one of the things you will often hear paired with artificial intelligence is this concept of machine learning. It's very similar, and by the definition sounds like it's almost the same, but in actuality, machine learning is actually a subset of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is the study of computer algorithms that improve automatically through experience. So a common example of this might be your Spotify recommendations, or when you're flipping through TikTok and you're seeing a bunch of videos that seem to be related to each other. What's happening is that there is an analysis of data inputs over time to constantly find a better answer to the problem at hand. And it might be, what is this person most interested in now? So that's machine learning. Now, automation is also related. Automation is the technology by which a process or procedure is performed with minimal human assistance. So we're all dancing around this concept of using technology in place of humans. On a basic level, even a soda machine is an example of automation. I think we're all obviously familiar with that. In software, automation may or may not leverage AI or machine learning, but it is what powers most of today's interfaces when we interact with things. So if you go in to the airport and you go to a kiosk to check into your flight, you're using automation. Automation is happening there. So for hotels, the question is, how are these concepts being used in hotels? And especially, how are they being used in forecasting and pricing? How are algorithms processing data generated by consumer behavior and changing market variables? And why is access to data so critical to today's systems? So before we get into the actual roundtable discussion, I want to go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Nicole. Nicole, if you could just introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. I'm Nicole Adair. I'm the Director of Revenue Management Services with SHR. I oversee kind of the business operations of our Wave RMS, and then also the operations of our revenue management for hire consulting services.
Well, thanks very much. Yosh Shop, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi, my name is Yosh Shop. I'm currently CEO and co-founder of ROOMDEX. Prior to ROOMDEX, I founded Stay in Touch and sold it to Shiji. Prior to that, I was working at Micros for almost 18 years in charge of the Opera hotel products globally.
Thanks. Archie, how about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Archie Weinstedt. I run the sales team over at TripTease. If you aren't familiar with what we do, we are a global business that helps hotels drive more direct bookings through their website, through multiple different customer acquisition tools.
Thank you very much. Guido Salvatore?
Hi, my name is Guido Salvatore. I'm the founder of Connectivity Matter. We work with hotels to help them optimize their distribution. We do this by helping them with their vendor selection, integration, and also system optimization. We work with hotels in terms of their channel strategy, and we also offer revenue management support. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Priya, can you give us your background?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm Priya Rajamani. I head onboarding and support at Stay in Touch. Stay in Touch is a property management solution provider which focuses on mobility. And I have now been with them since its inception and have been involved with hospitality for close to 2 decades. First with Taj Hotels in India, heading their CRS platform, then with Micros and Opera in Asia Pacific, and now, of course, with Stay in Touch. Thanks, Paul.
Excellent, thank you. So just before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone that we are happy to also answer questions from the audience. There is a question feature within your Zoom interface, so you can go ahead and submit those questions, and we'll try to get to those during this talk. So just getting underway, Yas, I want to start with you. So we're talking automation, machine learning. You started a new company, ROOMDEX, and it basically is pushing out upsell offers on behalf of hotels. These upsell offers are a little bit different in that they're not just static offers given away to anybody. Without giving away your secret sauce, how does the intelligence you have put into this product go into the creation of these offers, and how is it related to machine learning?
Thanks, Paul. So one of the main focuses that we set out on when we founded ROOMDEX was to work towards total automation. So we want to make sure that the hotel or hotel staff does not have to do anything to make these offers a reality that they present to the guests. So we would present an offer digitally to the guest. When the guest buys one of those offers on their smartphone or another device, it goes into the PMS automatically, and nothing else that has to be done by the hotel staff. So automation was the core, but we also want to make it easier on a day-to-day business and a day-to-day case. And we didn't want something where hotel staff had to go in and figure out what price to charge today for the room upgrades or the early check-in or early arrivals and late departures. Because if once we build up enough data, then we can probably calculate and see what sort of prices we can calculate. So for example, when at ROOMDEX, when we try to calculate a room upgrade offer, it's not static. We just look at, okay, what did the guest pay previously? What's his type of reservation? Is it a family? Is it a business traveler? Is it a leisure weekend traveler? All those types of things have something to do with price sensitivity and have an effect on what is a guest willing to pay for or not to pay for, especially also the rate that they paid originally for a room that they actually have the reservation on. So we're trying to use all that information. Then we've gone live now for 6 weeks. So now we're building up data that allows us to kind of further tune that particular offer that we're making to the guest. So sometimes the offer is $15 for the next guest. The same offer would be $17 or $18 or $20. It's all around what do we think based on the data and the offer and the size of the data, what we can offer to the guest, rather than the static Monday to Friday. An upgrade is $50 to the next level, and in the weekend it's $75. That may work once, but doesn't work multiple times a week, and therefore the sum of it all is larger if you kind of automate it and think about it from a revenue management point of view, how you can learn from the transactions that happened in the past and as such come up with a better deal. So that's sort of the essence of what we're trying to achieve.
So the algorithm is essentially learning from what's working and what's not working in terms of the.
That's correct. Yeah, that's definitely where we want to go to.
So Nicole, let's talk about revenue management. Yas mentioned revenue management. What revenue management is all about, crunching data to come up with pricing that is right for current market conditions. Where do these kinds of systems fall in the spectrum of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and automation?
Right. So there are some kind of quote unquote revenue management systems that are mostly automation driven, kind of just utilizing business roles and things like that to execute decisions, whether they're simple or more complex. However, true RMSs utilize various types of AI and machine learning, whether that's neural networks, reinforcement learning, to process these huge volumes of data that the hotels have, whether it's the hotel's data, outside sources that are being incorporated from rate shoppers, guest reviews, things like that, web search traffic. And they apply the AI and machine learning to actually learn from that data, generate decisions, and then also learn from the results of those decisions that are generated. So they can use all of that data, all of the learning from those algorithms to forecast and then make those right recommendations, and then also automate the distribution of those recommendations and those decisions. So it's kind of seamless end to end, from the data incoming to the compilation of the data, the crunching through of the data to generate those decisions, and then deploying those decisions onward.
Got it. Thank you. Guido, I just want to kind of following up on what Nicole has said. How is this related to like forecasting and what goes into a good forecasting system?
Sure. When I think of a good forecasting system, really I'm looking for one that's going to focus on the right patterns and identify those. And I also need it to be adapting quickly to the change. And it has to be able to deliver guidance in terms of things that are actionable and that make sense. You know, I'm a big believer in data visualization for hotels to gather and see all this information. But when I look at a forecasting system that's going to set that flight path or my revenue strategy, I need that system to be consuming and actioning all of that data. And, you know, when TravelClick went out and to work with RMS systems to consume, say, that Demand 360 data, the idea wasn't just to share the data, but really was to see if the RMS vendors were able to process that data and improve forecasting. So whether the forecasting model is working on price elasticity or propensity models to try and predict consumer behavior around acting on certain price offers, you know, for me, a good forecasting system goes way beyond just predicting what that hotel occupancy is for a specific day. It needs to be giving you the insight through the enrichment of the data that it's consuming. And I think we're just kind of just scratching at the surface. I think if we think a little bit towards the future, towards more of an attribute-based pricing model, we're going to need to leverage AI and machine learning to help us predict that consumer behavior around these unbundled offerings. And if we're able to do that, it's going to have this huge upside. And on top of that, machine learning has the ability to just automatically learn and improve from experiences without having to be explicitly programmed. And that's really where I see the forecasting to be super valuable.
And you're feeling that that machine learning is happening on the RMS side of it, as opposed to say on the PMS side.
Well, you know, for me, it starts really with forecasting and understanding all of this data, and then that RMS applying, say, the rate strategies to what it's predicting, or predicting that guest behavior, or saying how much can we be charging. So it really starts from that forecasting system, and it's that revenue management system that now is applying that strategy and saying where I can price. And really, yeah, I do see that sitting within the RMS versus inside of PMS, which is a great source of the data.
So Archie, let's kind of continue on your side. Again, we're talking about, you know, sort of algorithms and you know, machine learning. Your company's focus is a little bit more on marketing, customer acquisition. Like reading your website, I came across a sentence that said, "We acquire high margin, or you can acquire high margin guests with algorithmic bidding that learns from customer behavior on your website." So that implies like a certain degree of machine learning. Can you expand on what the learning aspect is there and what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So that sentence is likely referring to, you know, traffic acquisition channels such as, you know, meta search and like display retargeting, which are auction-based platforms similar to Google AdWords. But the learning aspect behind it, and someone actually raised a really good question in the chat around, you know, being able to use machine learning during unprecedented times like this. I guess we don't really have to beat around the bush discussing it, but learning in the sense that travel behaviors are changing, and you do need to adjust the way that you're approaching your using automation, and historical data doesn't hold as much weight as it once previously did. So learning in the sense that you need to be able to adjust how you're using this automation based on how travel behaviors have changed has been super important for us. And then I guess to answer the question in the chat around not having enough data, you know, that's extremely true. Part of running an automated platform or using machine learning is having the statistical significance of the decisions that the the algorithm is making to know that, yes, we should do X over Y because we have enough data and we're confident that that decision is going to drive superior results. So using the right amount of data to make a decision is super important, which is why a lot of tech vendors like us pride ourselves on the scale that we have, because we're able to collect data from loads of hotels and allow independent hoteliers to take advantage of that data scale and that automation.
Well, it's also like it's a cumulative process as well. So like Yas was saying, what's happening is that there may not be a critical mass of data on consumer behavior right now, considering also that things are constantly changing. But the idea is that it's a constant, machine learning is all about constant refinement, constant learning.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always going to be approaching it a smarter and smarter answer.
So can I just wanted to step on what Archie said. It's I think it's important to understand that with cloud technology today, that we as vendors, or some of us as vendors, have the capability, as Archie is saying, to kind of collect data not from one hotel, which right now at 10-20% occupancy is not a lot, but can collect that of thousands of hotels that are part of that platform. And when you put all of that together, then you are creating some statistical significancy that can be reapplied to these customers individually, which doesn't mean that we, take one rate strategy from one hotel and sell it to the other hotel, but like we use all that data that we have, and and I'm sure Nicole is the same, that's available to determine what's a good strategy and what's potentially a more likely a good price or forecast, even in times when occupancy is low in one hotel, but across the board, people still travel at that lower occupancy, which should allow for some price forecasting and optimization.
Yeah, and something that we've really been looking at SHR and on the Wave side is, although right now, unfortunately, revenue managers, we're really having to divorce ourselves from this concept of, past seasonality, historicals, what we were doing same time last year. There are still patterns emerging in what's happening. It's more of a question of looking at short-term performance to forecast the short term, and then how you start to bring in more established seasonality, more established patterns as you look at that forecast further out as well, right? So what sort of time frame you're looking at for forecasting and what sort of time frame you're applying that to. And that is, again, something that AI and machine learning can do very well because it's constantly learning, but just kind of reframing how you're looking at forecasting. And you're right, you can't forecast a year out from now extremely effectively right now, because things are changing, but just looking at that balance, right? And that time frame of data and the time frame to which you're applying that data.
Got it. So we've talked a little bit about machine learning. Let's talk a little bit about automation. So Priya, at Stay in Touch, there's a big focus on automation in your products, such as your check-in and your checkout processes. Why do you think these automated interactions have been so popular with hoteliers? You guys have grown quite a bit. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So one of the primary reasons for the increasing popularity of these automated interactions is basically how they translate into operational efficiencies almost immediately. The objective for us here is to replicate, using automation, some of these more repetitive tasks that a staff member would typically do using a pre-built logic that is already in use and being applied today. And we are therefore using the same logic, but in an automated platform. For instance, when we do preference-based auto room assignment, this is something that we are able to replicate for front desk check-ins. Task-based room assignment, which we are able to replicate for allocating rooms across the housekeeping team when you're managing your task force for the day. Auto check-in at a preset arrival time or bulk checkout at a preset departure time. All of these are activities that have a preset logic that is being used day in and day out operationally. And these are the ones that we are therefore replicating and automating to increase efficiencies across the board. What we're seeing is at times like today, especially when hotel managers are more and more accountable to keep their eyes on the bottom line, introducing these operational efficiencies go a long way in making it possible for them. And then, of course, from a guest point of view, this gives them the ease of use and the speed of the process itself, which ultimately enhances their guest experience and making it a win-win overall.
Yeah, and I also imagine a lot of hotels are operating at lower levels of staff than they had previously, and so
Exactly.
such tools is really critical, in terms of overhead. Yas, you had originally started at Stay in Touch, and of course, it had a focus. It was very much based on mobile and self-service. What are your thoughts on self-service and how it's evolving?
I think right now it's like COVID is sort of it just happened earlier this year, and all of a sudden I think a lot of hotels were thinking, oh yeah, we cannot do this in person anymore, purely because they have to be social distancing. But I think overall the self-service component and the automation that you can link to that is, especially now with low occupancy, really important. One, for the social distancing. Two, there's simply not enough staff or not enough funds to have all these staff members available to do this all manually the old way. Second, I think, the consumer, the guest of today demands more and more self-service and more automation. They don't want to stand in line. They don't want to have to wait for someone to do a very simple task that for some reason has to take 5 to 10 minutes sometimes. They all want to be in control, do it on themselves. So I think the self-service components was one of the reasons why at the time I started Stay in Touch. But I think, the last couple of years I've seen other PMSs also building it in or working with partners to provide it. It's just an ongoing important thing. And I think it's a good thing that it's there right now. And that definitely when people have a cloud PMS, they can implement these things and achieve great sense of automation, even at lower occupancy.
So I want to address, we had a couple questions came up, and the most recent one is, the question was, is artificial intelligence geared more for larger hotels rather than small B&Bs? And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, and I want to open up to anybody who can kind of jump in and answer this. It seems like it's not so much that artificial intelligence is, I think people are focused on the input of the data as opposed to the output of the data. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about application of AI for like non-large brands? Because I think that there's some confusion maybe about where data can possibly come from that you would be learning from. Maybe
sorry, go ahead, Archie.
Sure. So, I think maybe part of what I was trying to convey earlier is that part of the advantage of working with a business that's leveraging AI in this space, knowing that you need the data that large brands have, but as a boutique hotel or guest house or B&B, is that you can leverage the scale of thousands of hotels to help you make better decisions about your B&B is the value for your hotel.
So the products that, in other words, the product that may include some artificial intelligence or machine learning, you're benefiting from the data output. The data input may be from more than just your guests. So right. It's applicable probably to all size hospitality organizations. Moving forward, so we've been talking a little bit about. That's a great segue in terms of talking about data and where data is coming from. So whether it be machine learning or automation, data is the fuel. Unfortunately, a lot of times legacy systems, legacy PMS systems are often still the keepers of the majority of the data on an individual hotel basis. Yet those can be sometimes difficult to access. You were at TravelClick for many years. What are your thoughts in terms of accessing data?
So fortunately, I see things are improving, but we still have a long way to go. I think vendors really need to respect that data integrity. What that means is maintain a data structure intact from when they receive it and when they pass it down. I think vendors also need to really work towards that documentation around how they're handling that data and when they send it to, because hotels really need to understand how each platform is handling and transforming it. Hotels need to be also super mindful in terms of how they're configuring their platform, because that also affects that data quality. And I think when we start getting obsessed with that data enrichment, we start breaking down these data silos, And when we start seeing that there is this dilution of data or that a legacy system is working kind of against us, you have to make that hard decision sooner versus later. You can't let that just continue, and you have to deal with it. Fortunately, today, there's a lot of systems that are taking more of an open API concept, and they're really based around sharing that data, and they see that as adding more value to their product versus kind of building a barrier to protect their product from, say, another vendor.
So Priya, how you're coming from the PMS side, how are you seeing this data sharing situation being resolved on the PMS side?
Absolutely, and I'll take a lead from both you and what Guido have said. And as you rightly pointed out, traditionally PMSs have been the custodians of all the customer data, and based on the infrastructure and the systems in place, they can either be difficult or at times impossible to retrieve and integrate with. As a cloud PMS, what our focus has been is to provide access within these secure boundaries. And we've done this through our open API platform. Guido touched upon it briefly, and that's been our strategy as well. The goal here being to provide a secure and organized interface for all the application services, as well as extending the capabilities of the PMS itself through our different partner integrations. We are working towards building an ecosystem along with the other partner vendors, allowing pluggable components into the PMS using this open API framework.
So data consistency. Let's talk. I'm going to move back over to revenue management. And Nicole, this is more of a question for you. We've been talking a lot about data and the enormity of data coming from multiple sources, the enormity of data. Revenue management is all about crunching data. It's all about getting in data from the weather, data from the airlines, data from what have you, all as many different data points as possible in order to understand market conditions and pricing. However, and I think revenue management systems have proven that they are successful. However, to this day, even amongst non-boutique, non-B&B hotels, market adoption of revenue management systems is relatively low. Why do you think that is? Why aren't we seeing more adoption of this, given how effective they are, and also, quite frankly, how much labor they save?
Well, I mean, our industry is notoriously slow to adopt new technology. I remember a McKinsey study from a few years ago that showed travel and tourism was dead last amongst 13 different industries when it came to AI adoption. And I think part of it is what Priya and Guido were just talking about, which is kind of the legacy systems, the ownership of that data, the difficulty of, or the perceived at least difficulty of getting that data. And adopting the new technology, the time investment that may be involved in that, the labor investment of actually implementing it. And then the fact that for at least the last few years, there's probably been a bit of inertia on the hotel side as well, a rising tide that has floated many boats. And I think for a lot of hotels or operations, there's almost a question of things are working okay right now. So why change, why implement this different system? Whereas now I think we're definitely approaching a bit of a sea change when it comes to technology adoption, because everybody is having to completely rethink how they're working, how they're making decisions. And it's definitely going to be a big driver of the adoption, as well as, again, those open APIs that Priya and Guido were touching on. It's just becoming a lot easier to implement these systems, have all of your systems in your tech stack work together, and really, really draw that benefit.
So are you suggesting the COVID crisis is kind of playing havoc on kind of rate setting because nobody really understands what the strategy is? All the normal things are no longer in place, or is that what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. And it's also previously, it was easy enough to use kind of traditional revenue management thought processes or, techniques, strategies, and just kind of apply them and not necessarily set it and forget it. But the market was such for a lot of people that there wasn't a huge drive to really make the investment to seek out new ways of doing things or new things to implement to drive that. And I think that with all the changes now, it's kind of that push that a lot of people maybe didn't have in the past.
Yeah.
So-
I think, sorry, Paul. I want-
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was. I think Nicole makes some very good points, and especially I'm realizing it now, even though I probably knew it always, is that now that I'm no longer building a PMS, which I've done for the last 30 years, but I'm building something that has to connect to a PMS, it's really hard to connect to, especially the legacy PMSs, unfortunately. And so if you compare, to Nicole's point, our industry with, let's say, the CRM industry outside our industry, for example, Salesforce, you can connect anything to that. It's all in the cloud, and you could just a few clicks and you've got a new thing connected to it. That is what some of the newer PMSs, Muse, Stay in Touch, Protel, and some other ones that are fully in the cloud. And also Oracle is now finally embracing on with what they call OHIP, but it's not there. Most hotels don't have that. They all have that old legacy stuff. So for example, I was working with a hotel in Holland that's using a very old PMS, and basically the answer from the PMS vendor is, well, we can't connect to you. So basically that hotel has to change PMS in order to move forward in their business. And I think that's a reality check. A lot of hotels need to start thinking about that are on these legacy PMSs. If you want to move forward and you want to take advantage of some of these technologies that are out there now, and I have to say, without being biased, there's a lot of new hotel technology that is very easy and very affordable to implement if you're on a cloud-based PMS. And I think that's an area where we as an industry, vendors and consumers or hotels need to really think about. In order for us to really provide artificial intelligence and automation, there has to be an upgrade of the legacy technologies out there. And it's hard right now because of COVID, but on the other hand, it's all cloud-based, it's all on a monthly subscription. It's not that expensive anymore than it used to be, just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think during good times, hotels, they don't have to work as hard per se to find new business. They don't have to look as hard and look under, different rocks. And I think COVID forced them, and it showed them there's business, just drive market a couple hours away that maybe they weren't paying attention to. And I think now that they realize, okay, I really need to be looking at this data, and I need to be using all of the tools available if I want to work efficiently. And if there is a pain point, potentially such as a legacy system that they're using, they need to deal with it now, because just when things start getting good again, you can't fall back into that past practice of just relying on that business. You need to keep being aggressive and using all these different systems that many have been available for years now, just you weren't using them. So
you're saying that COVID has essentially been a catalyst for automation, across the industry.
Oh, definitely.
Or the adoption thereof.
Yeah, I think it's forcing hotels to rethink and to work differently.
Got it. So Archie, we had talked a little bit about, you had talked a little bit about, in answering one of the questions from the audience, about COVID and the impact on, accurate data. So can you tell us a little bit more what you're seeing in terms of on the search and acquisition side? Like what's happening on the ground? How's COVID impacting search and acquisition, and how is the automation tools helping with that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some, which other businesses on this call are certainly aware of as well. They just are pulling data from different places. But some of the major behavioral changes, if you're a hotel sitting on this call, like you really just need to be understanding and trying to take advantage of or shifting your strategy. Some of the major ones being the rise in mobile traffic. If you aren't a mobile first business, like booking your hotel online and through the booking engine, the rise in mobile traffic across the globe in total has been insane to watch. As someone who comes from a business where our script is live across thousands and thousands of hotels, it's quite clear that people are mobile first right now. So if you don't have a mobile strategy, that needs to be considered, as well as the short booking windows, as well as short length of stays that are happening, largely because people are searching within their drive market. They're not getting on airplanes. It just kind of makes sense. If you are booking a hotel on your phone for a place that you can drive to an hour away and you're only going to stay for 2 nights as opposed to 7, it's a much easier decision to make on your phone, and you're doing it last minute as opposed to planning out this long family vacation where you're hopping on an airplane and you're making a purchase that's much larger. It's going to be on desktop because it's a much bigger order. So just being aware of these changes in consumer behavior is extremely important. Not only how you set your rates, the systems that you choose to buy, and just your overall strategy needs to be thinking and catering towards this. And honestly, it's an opportunity that I think everyone should be taking advantage of.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think one thing, as we see the change of the COVID, what I'm saying is actually owners and asset managers really pushing this topic and really saying that, okay, the impact of COVID has brought them to rethink things such as, automation, what are different products that they could be using and how they should be, acting differently. I'm also seeing, there's different resources being available, whether that's, VC or internal. You got companies like MadeBot getting Series B funding. And it's also interesting to see, through COVID, how we're really untapping this automation and leveraging that data, things like that MadeBot capturing all this data within the hotel, such as, the humidity, the temperatures, Wi-Fi signals. So I think this COVID's forced us to relook at that automation, and we're seeing it being applied. And I think we're just going to see that continue happening.
Excellent. So, I was looking over at some of the comments from the audience, and, there was an interesting question here or comment that said, one more reason that RMS can end up being more expensive for smaller brands. I'm not really sure what that is related to, but I do have another question I have set up for Nicole here that talks about machine learning, automation, and RMS return on investment. So someone's, I think smaller brands, smaller hotels maybe there's a perception of expense when it comes to RMS. Does machine learning and automation impact return on investment so that it may, maybe it may appear to be expensive, but ultimately is not?
Right. Well, and to touch on that question or that comment, I think there's definitely a perception, whether accurate or not, historically, of RMSs as very expensive, a huge investment, both money and time. And I think again, right now it's worthwhile kind of reevaluating the options in the marketplace and seeing what's out there, because that's not necessarily the case where it may have been 5-10 years ago in terms of the options for an RMS, especially for a smaller property. And from a value perspective, from an ROI perspective for any hotel, there's 2 areas where machine learning and the AI really bring value for everyone. And that's in kind of automating your rote processes to free up time for strategic focus, which is especially important for people running a very lean team right now, and handling kind of the day-to-day decisions, pricing decisions, things like that. So for hotels, they think in terms of like the 80-20 rule, where they want to be spending their time, what's important right now, and where they actually end up spending time carrying all those functions out. Things like your day-to-day forecast, your ops forecasts, data compilation, reporting. Guido mentioned the data visualization. Those can all be seamlessly addressed by utilizing an RMS. And even in terms of pricing, a computer is very well suited to determining whether going plus or minus $10 in rate is going to have a positive or negative impact on your net revenue generation. And small decisions like that can really add up in terms of incremental revenue. And eventually, fingers crossed, hopefully pretty soon, we'll be back to the additional positive benefits of applying those same learning processes to overbookings and restrictions and things like that can have machine learning applied and be somewhat automatically distributed. So all of that does drive a return on the software itself, but again, frees up that 20% of your time, your human capital, which is going to be really important as we move into 2021 and hopefully a post-COVID recovery. Because then we get into the concept of judgment integration. which maintains that your human intelligence from domain experts, like your revenue managers, your directors of sales, etc., are beneficial on their own in 3 specific areas. So events that are so recent, they don't yet have an observable impact on your data. Events from the past that we don't expect to happen again, and then future events that we know that are coming, but don't have an actual impact yet. And as I'm sure everybody that's watching can imagine, a lot of what's going on right now falls in those 3 categories. So again, you're unlocking that benefit of your human capital by investing a little bit for all of that other automation and the decision-making that an RMS can bring to your property.
So you're basically saying there's 2 pieces of this when you're looking at ROI and expense. There's going to be the performance of the system, but there's also the benefit that you're getting in terms of efficiency and labor hours. You know, you're not churning through all these decisions and everything that you can be looking at a much larger strategic discussions as opposed to, you know, cranking away on small daily pricing issues.
Right. Yeah. The incremental revenue that comes from those smaller pricing decisions, the restrictions, things like that. And then also, again, freeing up your brain power for the larger strategy and those bigger pieces as well, and how your hotel and operations team can address those.
Okay, so let's look forward a little bit. Priya, you know, what is on the horizon in the future for PMS? You know, will interconnected cloud-based systems, you know, learn from each other in new and different ways? I know you have a background in revenue management. Will the RMS PMS relationship evolve more because of machine learning? This is more looking at the future and not necessarily what's on the ground currently.
Sure, Paul. So what we're seeing today with RMS platforms that they're moving more and more towards optimizing based on the customer value. So traditionally, the focus has always been on room revenue, but we are also seeing now a shift in focus, extending some of these optimizing capabilities to, like Nicole said, ancillary revenue, as also against the lifetime value of a customer. So, you know, some of these features include, for instance, looking at attribute-based selling, ways to optimize selling based on room attributes without, you know, predefining a set of room types that we do today, and then price optimizing per attribute. So all of this is new technology or new focus for these RMS companies. And all these data points are today being captured and tracked on the PMS platform. So be it the customer behavior in terms of the purchasing pattern, as well as the transaction times, including, you know, the time for the check-in and check-out, against and juxtaposed against the availability of the supply itself, the rooms and their availability, their peak hours and drop hours and so on. So, you know, based on this, you know, an integration that allows for a more integrated platform with an exchange of more data points between these integrated environments will definitely allow our systems to evolve and provide these opportunities to a hotel and a hotelier alike to capitalize on the customer value. So that's how I would see things materialize between these environments.
I mean, it seems like the sort of, you know, the evolution into attribute-based selling and the optimization of that kind of speaks to kind of what Gita was saying before in terms of data structures and sharing data structures, because that's opening up a whole new gamut of data points in there that may not have some consistency between systems currently. I wanted to talk a little bit, go back to upsell automation. There are a lot of, you know, we've been hearing a lot about, you know, talking a lot about revenue management systems. Upsell automation is virtually non-existent right now. So Yas, why do you think that is? Why do you think that, you know, revenue management systems are using machine learning, and there's a lot of intelligence in RMSs right now, but upselling, which is, you know, a piece of the revenue for a hotel, it's rarely applied there now. What's going on?
I think it's because in hotels, as well as in software, it's been an afterthought, one. And second, to do it well, you require two-way connection. And most of the upsell vendors out there today have 1.5. Some of them, very few, actually have a two-way to only the major PMSs. So that makes automation virtually impossible to do it well. But so I think it's a combination of that afterthought and the lack of integration. So that's it. And now in a time like this, where every dollar is a dollar, because there is very few people going to a hotel, so whoever comes to a hotel, you want to try to get some more money or revenue out of. And now all of a sudden, I think it has an opportunity to come more forward and taken serious. Also, I think the growth of digital, and Archie mentioned that earlier, the tremendous growth of digital booking and mobile guests basically on their mobile phone. Now you have a tool to send somebody an offer more than you did, for example, let's say 10 plus years ago. So I think it's a combination of those things that there is a lack of automation in this. I also think that some of the vendors out there today, and also some of the hoteliers, for some reason there had to be, if somebody buys an upgrade offer, it has to be approved by somebody at the property before they can get that offer, which is kind of strange because everybody buys a room for one night on the internet, and nobody just confirms whether you can buy that room or not. You have that room. But some of the legacy systems out there on upsell require you to approve, the hotel to approve that upgrade, which kind of defeats the purpose in our opinion. So I think it's a combination of lack of automation, not necessarily a way of communicating that offer in the past to the guest, but that's all gone now. Now it's available. And with the modern PMSs, a full two-way should really allow for quick upgrades and really easy add-on top of existing revenue, especially in coordination with revenue management. One thing that we would like to do as soon as possible is that when PMS systems are connected with the revenue management system, we want to kind of work with the daily rates of that revenue management system in order to get the upgrade offer even better than we already are offering right now.
Got it. I'm kind of interested your thoughts on upsell automation, given that you're working with a lot of different clients on these kinds of topics. Does upsell come into the picture very often, and how are they thinking about it?
So I don't think it's coming up as often as it should be. We talked about trying to seek out incremental revenue, and upselling is just ripe for that. I think what has to happen, there needs to be like this shift in mindset. I know years ago, when I was at Somalia, we worked on this upselling program to train the front desk agents to try and upsell guests that come to the counter. But like Yas mentioned, things are changing. We're going more digital. There's more just mobile check-in, keyless entry, and hotels just need to be thinking differently about these revenue opportunities and how they should be approaching upsell. That notion of an understaffed front desk clerk being able to pitch the right offer and close an upsell, just that needs to be put aside. And I think just like how hotels before maybe weren't really looking at different sources of business like that drag market, I think they need to rethink every opportunity, and upselling being one of that, and start leveraging how this could be automated and be put in front of the guest at the right time. And you don't leave it till that last line of defense, which is kind of the old mentality of, well, upselling is handled by the front desk clerk. So I'm starting to see a little bit more, but that's something that we kind of introduced with the hotels to say, hey, there's different sources of revenue and different ways of, increasing your RevPAR, $1 or $2 here or there.
Yeah, I think with COVID, there's no such thing as, secondary or unimportant revenue for a hotel. I think that at this point, it's all important. Here's the big question. I'd like to go around the table. The big question is now the good time to switch technology. So we're essentially talking about different technologies and the things that go into powering these technologies. We have COVID, we have, low occupancy, various lockdowns happening across the world. We also have vaccines coming out in the near future, some say. Is now a good time to switch technology? So Archie, I'm going to start with you and let you start the conversation.
I can't speak for every hotel. Hoteliers are all in different scenarios right now. I think that there's clear reasons why you would want to switch technologies or add a new technology right now is to adapt to how travelers are changing, or to make an upgrade to how your current software works, to a cloud-based PMS, for example. Like if things are a bit slow, I know a lot of hoteliers are talking about switching technologies because it just feels like the right time and it's going to benefit them in the future. As one of the objections of switching a PMS always in the past has been the time that it takes to do so. Well, if you have time on your hands, it's probably a good time to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't say so if new technologies are a bigger investment for you that you can't afford. There's lots of hotels that are struggling right now. So I mean, obviously, your P&L statements need to be taken into consideration. But if it's going to help you with the future of travel, then I would 100% recommend it. As well as all the vendors on this call are not immune to the pandemic, so you're probably going to get a good deal if you try and get new technology right now.
That's true.
Is one thing to note. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a good time to be. It's a buyer's market, you could say. Potentially. Priya, what are you seeing? He just mentioned, sometimes changing out a PMS is expensive, but also sometimes it can be time consuming. So, but if you've got time now, why not?
Yeah, I know. I'm of the same opinion. We, as Archie mentioned, definitely, I do see a lot of positive facts related to switching technology at this point in time, especially if you have time on your hands and if you've got the investment capability to do so, because you would be getting the best possible offer from your vendors at this point. Also, what we're seeing is that the current circumstances have almost forced hotels to step back and reimagine their guest experience. The whole concept of mobile keys, mobile check-in, self-check-in, all of that has kind of been reinforced. And the whole requirement, because of your lean staff, to have these operational efficiencies and automation in place. So this actually, allows you the time to evaluate and study what the marketplace has to offer. What is the technology offerings that you can get in the market, the cloud option, the monthly subscription, SaaS-based option, all of those points that have been covered in some of the talks that we've had so far. So definitely a time to kind of reevaluate your short and long-term goals and find the best technology partner that will support you and grow along with you through this crisis and going forward.
Thank you, Nicole. What about from your perspective, and particularly when people are thinking, should we make the move to maybe it's not switching out systems, maybe it's just adding a system like a revenue management system.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Archie and Priya already made very good points, with reduced impact to guests, the ability to, implement things now with reduced impact to guests, having the time, making the investment in the future for when there is a recovery. One thing that, I would highlight, and that we have really found as we've implemented for hotels that haven't used such technology in the past, is that they've been some of the most vocal fans of this new technology, because it isn't something that they've had, so it is new. They are finding that it increases their efficiencies quite a bit. And just as we look forward, I'm looking at one of our other questions that were here in the chat. Someone was talking about historical data, or how you can forecast, and what do you do with the historical data? You don't look at it a lot of, in a lot of instances right now. But one of the things to keep in mind is that it's a good idea to invest now, whether that's time, the money, if you have it, et cetera, for when recovery does happen. Because one of the things, again, that AI and machine learning do and will do very well is find those trends in your data, probably before someone on your very lean team could find them in the hotel, and help the hotels to maximize when recovery does start to happen. They can respond more quickly, their systems will respond automatically, and they will be more prepared when demand does come back, because it will, and it may be, sooner than we were all hoping with some of the news this week. But getting these types of systems in place now will position them to capitalize better and quicker on recovery, because it is coming.
Yeah, I think that it's not going to be, you're not going to wake up one day and then everything's going to be back to normal. I think recovery might be volatile in terms of what happens. There's, you look at the stock market and somebody puts out a press release and all of a sudden the stocks go through the roof. It could be, pricing, occupancy, demand, all of those things are also kind of volatile as well. And Guido, what do you think about this question?
So, just being sensitive, I know there's, many hotels are just trying to figure out how to survive and how to stay afloat with with the property and be able to move forward. But I think if within the property, you can really look at all these different tools, automation, these different systems, and go to the owner, the asset manager, and say, here's a plan not only to survive, but to thrive and be able to keep working, say, with a lean operation, but leverage all these new tools. You're now becoming this change agent, and you're really driving kind of how this hotel is moving forward. So, I think, yes, it's a great time. Occupancies are lows, but that's not really the driver. I think the driver is how do you establish this property to really take shape once demand comes back? And I think, working with your owner, your asset manager, you'll see that they're open to these types of conversations. I think you need to work with the vendors to understand what are the ROIs, what are the type of returns you're going to be looking for, and build out and map out how the future really needs to be. And I think if you can build that model and then present it to, say, your ownership or your management, you'll be seen as driving this hotel's future and really secure it and ensuring it. So I definitely think it's the right time. I know it's difficult when you've got a GM doing check-ins, but I think that's when you need to really stop and plan for the future. And I know dollars are locked, but when you put a model saying, we can keep a very lean organization and still be able to deliver a great experience for your guests, and also unlock additional data that all of these automation tools are doing, I think it just really makes sense. And I think owners or asset managers will really resonate with that. And I think they want that. They want that thought leadership from their organization to say, we know what's out there in the market and we know how to build a successful hotel.
Excellent. Cool. Well, we're getting up to the top of the hour. Yas, I want to finish, let you have the last word on this.
Well, I think there's not much more to say. I think that Guido really said it very well, so did Nicole and Priya. I think what I want to add to Guido's comment about talk to your owner about, and they will listen, because I think in many cases they will. I mean, it's in their interest to ultimately retain that property, and they're very aware of how they can do that. I think what you mentioned earlier, Paul, vendors are very eager, and they're very helpful these days to make things work for hotels. So in other words, there's free trials, there is reduction of rates during this time. All these kind of things can be worked on and talked to. So I would take Guido's plan of make a plan, talk to the owner, and talk to some of your potential vendors to put some change in place and to be ready for post-COVID or whatever you want to call it, sometime 2021 and 2022. Now is a time to make some changes, because you're very low staff, so training will be easy. There is lots of cloud technology, and if you want, and if you have the time and you have a little bit of cash, changing the PMS is definitely, I think, a good step forward towards opening up access to that technology.
Cool. Thank you. So thank you, and also thank everybody on our panel today, and thank you, audience, for joining us. That's it for our webinar. Just to let everyone know that, as usual, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be uploading it to the ROOMDEX website later today. You'll receive an email with the link as well. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at info@roomdex.io, and we will get right back to you. Thanks, everyone, and we appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.